Today's daf is daf Ayin Hey. We start here on daf Ayin Dalin Amid Beis at the end. But Mem and Nagvan. So we learned about niguv, that in order to get the winemaker's vats, and clean it out of any absorption on a surface level of yayin nesech, we do niguv. So the Gemara asks, what do you do in niguv? What substance do you use to dry it? Rav Omer b'mayim, Rabbi Bar Chana Omer b'efer. So the Gemara assumes that there's a machlokas here about how to achieve niguv, whether it's b'mayim by soaking it in water, or it is be'efer by using ashes, which is a much more thorough kind of cleaning. So the Gemara says, Rav Omer b'mayim v'lo be'efer. Is it enough that you just rinse it off with water? That's not really going to accomplish much. You need something more powerful, and that's ash. And then the Gemara goes on to say, I don't even understand Rabbi Bar Bachana Omar B'Efer v'lo b'mayim. I mean, Efer is very powerful, but only if it's used in the context of mayim. So you're going to certainly need mayim as well. And how could it be that we have this extreme machlokas here with the two deos between Rav and Rabbi Bar Bachana? The Gemara says if we assume there's a machlokas here, we don't understand how this cleaning could be accomplished with ash alone without water. Ella. And here we start today's daf. Rav Omer b'mayim v'hu adin li efer. Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar li efer v'hu adin l'mayim. Both Rav and Rabbi Bar Bachana require both ash and water. V'lo pligi, and there's no machlokas here between the two. Ha b'ritivasa v'ha b'yabeshta. Rabbi Bar Bachana was talking about using ash before the water, and that was referring to ritivasa. Ritivasa means it's a wine press that's moist. It's got moisture to it. So therefore, Rabbi Bar Bachana says that the first thing you have to do is apply the ashes. On the other hand, when it comes to Rav is talking about a yabeshta. Rav starts the process not with ash, but rather with water, because he's dealing with a dry wine press. And in that case of a dry wine press, we need to start by moistening it with mayim. Itmar. Now, in the Beis Medrash of Rav, there was a study, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav himself, and Tarte Tlas. So it was said in the Beis Medrash of Rav, in the name of Rav, that the process itself of niguv has really a bunch of different steps, all told, 2 plus a third. So what does that mean, 2 plus a third? So let's say, for example, if we're talking about retivasa, so we're talking about a wine press that's already moist and wet. So we're going to start the process, kick it off with ash, and then we need water. But then we're going to need another round of ash. So all told, we have 3. Now, truth be told, that even after the second ash, which is necessary for the process of niguv to purify the wine press from any surface level blia of yayin nesach, we also are going to require some sort of washing away of the ash. I mean, you can't leave the ash on the wine press. That's not a healthy thing. But that last mayim is not really part of the halachic process of niguv, but rather it's just simply for cleanliness. It's a technical issue. And therefore, Rav is quoted as saying it's a threefold process. Shmuel Omer Tlas Arba. Shmuel, on the other hand, again talking about Yabeshta, is going to start with water, then go to ash. Then he needs a second round of water and a second round of ash. All told 4. Besura Masni Hachi, and that's how they taught it in Surah. However, there's another version of the machlokas here between Rav and Shmuel. B'Pumpadisa Masnu, Bei Rav Amri Mishmei de Rav, according to this transmission, they quoted Rav as saying, Tlas arba. Right, so we said that we're talking about a yabeshta, and therefore we start with water, then we go to ash, then again we go to water, and that seems to be what would culminate the entire process. However, he also mentions arba because if we were talking about not a yabeshta, but rather a retivasa, so we have to start with ash, and we're going to need a second ash. So we have ash, water, ash, and then we need the water to wash away the ash. And at this point, Rav is quoted as jacking up the number to 4 because he's including in the calculation of 4 even the final washing away of the ash, of the second ash. So we have ash, water, ash, and then we wash off the ash with water, and that's called arba. Shmuel Omar, arba chamesh. Shmuel says that guess what? If you're going to talk about a case of yabeshta, which means we start with water, but we need a double round of ash. So we have water, ash, and then we're going to need water again to wash away the ash. So the Shmuel is also calculating in this cheshbon the water that simply cleans off the final ash, below pligi. Mar kachashiv maya basroi, umar lo kachashiv maya basroi. It's not a machlokas in halachic terms. There's no fundamental issue here conceptually that they're arguing about. The only question is, do you want to count in your final cheshbon the last application of mayim, which is only for cleanliness purposes, meaning to take off the ash? So therefore, if you take, for example, the case of yabeshta, right? So then what's going to happen is that Rav is going to jack up the number to 4 because he's going to start with ash, then go to water, and then ash again, and he's going to jack it up to 4 because he's going to wash off the ash. Bo minei mi Rabbi Avo. The question was asked of Rabbi Avo, Hani gurge darmoi mai. So we have something called gurgoi, which has to be purified, so to speak. And it belonged to a guy, to an Aramean. Now, exactly what gurgoi is, if we take a look at Rashi, who quotes Rav Hai Gaon, then gurgoi is something called lattice work that was wrapped around a mound of grapes during the pressing process, right? The dricha, and the purpose of this lattice work, which was wrapped around the grapes, was to prevent the grapes from dispersing as a result of the pressure of the keresh, of the beam that's meant to squeeze the wine out of the grapes. However, there's an alternative shot that it's like some sort of container into which they put olive pulp and seeds, and that was for subsequent repressing. So now what's going on over here in this Gemara when the suffix is presented to Rabbi Avo regarding Gurgure Dablamai? Amalahu Rabbi Avo. Hare, we have some sort of tradition to Nisua in which this question that you are asking to Rabbi Avo was actually addressed. Hare shahayu gitav ubeis badav tmeim. So within the context of Tuma Vitara, and we have a case where the winery, or perhaps the olive mill, was Tomei, Ubikesh Lasosa Vitara, he wanted to produce his grapes and olives Vitara. These were the Shomrei Chulin Vitara back at the time of Chazal, who were very makbid that food should not be exposed to any tumah. And Hadapim v'ha'adoshim v'alulovim. So dapim are those boards that the crusher that we mentioned before that are used to press down the grapes. And adashim are called treading basins. And lulovim, of course, are palm brooms. And he says that madichon, he washes them off. V'ha'akolin shel nitzorim v'shel batzbutz menagvam. So these are other types of utensils, nettings, or wicker or hemp, and all he has to do is he dries them. So apparently, in terms of the division into categories, it's going to reflect a difference in how much of the grapes will be will be absorbed. What's very interesting is that the first category of utensils have the least amount, the most minimal amount of absorption. And we always spoke about niguv in the Mishnah regarding cleaning off the wine press. And here we have a requirement of something less than niguv, which is called hadacha, just simply washing them. Not that drying, profound process that requires ash and water and a second round of ash. And in a sense, this brisa that's being quoted here by Rabbi Avo contradicts the Mishnah, because the Mishnah speaks about niguv as the bottom barrel process or making of tara. Now we get to akolin, I should say, shel nitzarim, and in this case, you need niguv. And here there's an overlap between the brisa and the Mishnah. Shel shifa v'shel gumi miyashnon shnemasar chodesh. If they were composed of shifa or gumi or gemi, which are plants that belong to the rush family, and these plants are highly absorbent by nature, so the fibers made from them draw in the moisture of the forbidden wine, the ayin esech, and cannot be removed without aging. Aging meaning waiting 12 months. Rav Shimon Gamliel omer nicha migas ligas umibad lebad. Now Rav Shimon Gamliel, although he uses a different language to formulate his halacha, but he does come back to the same idea of Shnei Masar Chodesh. He just calls it migat legat or mibad lebad, right, from one vintage until the next, or from one olive pressing season to the next. So we're talking about seasons, and the season will cover over a year. Hainu Tanakama. So what did Rav Shimon Gamliel add or subtract from the Tanakama? Ika beinayu, the nafkamina is charfe ve'afli. So the nafkamina will be if the pressing season comes either early or late. If it comes early in a particular year, then there'll be less than a year between one usage and another, which, according to Tanakama, that doesn't play any role because you need absolutely 12 months. But according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, that's enough. Now we can have the opposite case where the season came late, so that there is more than a year between the usages, which, again, according to the Tanakama, is fine. But according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, you require waiting until the beginning of the following season, which might be 13 months or 14 months. The brisa continues, and it says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Harotza l'tara miyad, if He wants to purify them immediately. He doesn't have time to delay. Magi'ilan beroschin or cholton b'mei zeisin. So he could do a Hagala power process by putting them in hot water, boiling hot water, or he can scald them with water or olives, which sounds like Iri Klirishon. So olives would be softened in boiling water in order to facilitate the extraction of the oil. And Rabbi Yossi is allowing purification by pouring this water onto the nettings, and it might be less than boiling water, at least halachically, because it's only Iri Klirishon. Now the wine and the oil pressing took place once a year. And both the Tanakhama and Rav Shimon Gamliel agree that in a normal year, the waiting time is 1 year. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Mishum Rav Yossi Omer, Meinichan Tachas Tzinor Shememov Mekalchim. He could place them underneath a pipe of flowing water, or b'mayan shememov rodfim, running water from a spring, v'kama ona, for a period of an ona. Now, how long is an ona? The Gemara is going to explain this. The Brisa now says, "Kederch sha'amru b'yayin kach amru v'taros," and the Gemara seems to be assuming that the Malamed is Yayin Nesech and the Nilmad is Taros. So the Gemara says, Klapi Laya, you should say it in the opposite way. If you're talking about the comparison between Taros and Yayin Nesech, the Brisa seems to have it, Pumfaker, exactly the opposite. You're deriving a known fact from an unknown fact. But really, we're involved in a discussion regarding Taras, and in that sense, we should start with Taros, and then Kederch Shamru b'Taros, Kach Omru b'Yayin Nesach. So there's no way of deriving any conclusions in terms of purification from Yayin Nesach to Taros. I mean, we don't know what the din is in Yayin Nesach. Yayin Nesach will be determined, and the requirements and the standards will be a function of Taros. Ella, but rather, we should amend the Brisa, and it should say, Kederch sha'amru b'Taros, kach amru b'Yayin Nesach. Now the Gemara goes back to Ona, Kama Ona. Rabbi Yossi said that you have to place the pressing equipment in running water for an Ona. On Rabbi Chia bar Rabbi Yochanan, O Yom O Laila. Either a full 24 hours or 12 hours is enough. And Rabbi Chana, Shina Omrile, others say Rabbi Chana Bar She'ina, Omer Rabbi Bar Chana Rebbe, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Chatzi Yom v'Chatzi Laila. So the total of half a day and half a night, meaning 12 hours. Omer Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzav Lo Pligi. There's no machlokas between these two statements that were both attributed to Rabbi Yochanan. Habit Kufas Nisan v'Tishrei. Habit Kufas Tammuz v'Teves. So when we said it's either a day or a night, that applies to the season of Nisan or Tishrei, autumn or spring, when the days and the nights are of equal 12-hour duration. But Habit Kufas Tammuz v'Teves, the ruling requiring a half a day and a half a night, that's applicable in the season of Tammuz or Teves, meaning the summer or the winter, when the days and the nights are unequal in length. Omar of Yehuda, Hani Ravoke Diarmoi, right? If you have these sediment tracks of the Arameans, what's the purification process? Demazia Medichan. You take human hair and use it as a kind of a brush to wash it away. The Amram, if on the other hand these sacks are made of wool, Amro is tzemer, minagvan, then you require niguv, and washing them but hadocha is not sufficient. The chisna, if they're made of linen, miyashnam, he has to age them for 12 months. The ikar kitre sharilahu. If in these sacks there are knots, one must first untie the knot in order to remove anything that might got trapped underneath or between the knot. Continuing now with Rabbi Yehuda, Hani dikule v'chalosa de'armoi. What is the procedure for purifying the basket-like sieves and beehive-shaped sieves of an Aramean? And these are types of wicker baskets that are used for straining wine. The chayte bechavle de tsure. If they are sewn with ropes of palm fibers, then madichan, it's enough that he washes it off. They don't absorb. And although he said that the wicker nettings must be dried, niguv, drying is not required for strainers since their use is not limited to wine.